Welcome to The Debate. Today we're diving into the dense symbolic interpretation of the ocean as it's presented in the source manuscript. It skillfully captures the sea's terrifying power as the great unknown, while at the same time hailing it as the endless resource. And this intrinsic duality, I think, forces us to confront a really fundamental question about the text's cosmology.
It is a profound set of symbols, absolutely. Every wave and every droplet seems just laden with interpretive weight. And the challenge, for me at least, lies in determining the ultimate locus of power within that symbolism.
Exactly. So our central question is this. Does the symbolism of the ocean primarily function as a personification of supreme authority, a defining external force that governs material and societal reality? Or does its deepest meaning actually reside in reflecting, and ultimately rewarding, the internal spiritual perfection and agency of the individual, their faith, their certainty? I'm going to argue that the concept of the sea as the master, the supreme external governor, is paramount.
And I come at it from a different direction. While the sea is clearly defined as an authority figure, no argument there, I maintain that its significance is ultimately subordinate to the individual's internal capacity. The text's highest spiritual teachings, I believe, demonstrate the individual's ability to transcend material laws through perfected internal states. That makes spiritual conviction, or yaqeen, the truly transcended force.
So my position is really anchored in the manuscript's foundational linguistic choice. Look, the text is crystal clear on this. The ocean is defined as the personification of supreme authority. It is the master. This initial framing, it just establishes a hierarchical relationship. The sea acts upon the individual and the world, and we see this regulatory power immediately in its function as a predictive indicator of the external field of influence. Just consider the dual states. A calm sea isn't a reflection of the collective spiritual peace of the populace. No, it's a sign of peace under a benevolent, stable external authority, a just king, effective governance. Conversely, a stormy sea signifies fitna, massive external societal shifts, upheaval, political chaos. These are external, predictive indicators of material reality, operating on a scale far beyond the scope of any single individual's spiritual state. They establish the objective environment.
Right. The macro level.
Exactly. And furthermore, the scale of the rewards underscores the master's authority. When the text details the material benefits from, say, drinking the water, wealth and longevity, these are described as oceanic in scale. This isn't a small fortune, it's boundless. And that kind of scale necessitates a boundless grantor. The sea is the undeniable source of this resource, the determinant factor, not just a passive mirror. The power resides externally with the master, and the individual is the beneficiary.
I respect that reading of the initial definition. I really do. But I think you might be conflating the scale of the reward with the source of the transformative power. If the ocean were merely a passive granting authority, the spiritual framework would just be one of passive submission. Yet the greatest achievements described in the manuscript demand radical internal transformation and active agency, not just, waiting for external grace. Let's just look at the mechanisms for solving hardship. The crucial acts of spiritual cleansing, specifically performing wudu, the ritual ablution in the sea, are described as a profound spiritual reset. Now, wudu in its traditional context is preparation for prayer. It's an intentional act of purification. Using the sea for this signifies the power to dissolve deep hardships internally. It's washing away debt or illness from the soul. And that's far more profound than just receiving a debt payoff from some external bank. It suggests the external change is merely the effect of an internal cause.
I see the point you're making.
And this internal focus, it culminates in the ultimate act, walking upon the waves. This is not interpreted as authority grants you temporary immunity. No, it's interpreted specifically as the perfection of intention and strong yaqeen. And yaqeen is certainty, a state of absolute, unwavering conviction anchored in truth. The manuscript is saying this perfected internal state actively negates the limitations of the material world, making individual faith the superior transcendent force. The sea is the ultimate external metric against which this internal power is proven, but the power itself originates within the self.
You draw a beautiful distinction, but let's pressure test that distinction. Using the law of absorption, the act of drinking the seawater, you suggested the material rewards are secondary, but the text elevates them. It says drinking is a highest omen of wealth and longevity, promising massive, enduring fortune.
True, it does say that.
Now, while students who drink achieve the Sea of Wisdom, or Bahr al-Ulum, I would argue that this status is presented not as a rejection of the material reward, but as its intellectual parallel. Both are forms of boundless, limitless resource granted by the sea, by the authority. Bahr al-Ulum means the individual becomes a sea of knowledge, but they receive that limitless capacity by absorbing the oceanic source. The commonality here is the limitlessness of the gift, which reflects the sea's defining characteristic as the endless resource, the master bestowing boundless favor.
I think you're overlooking the philosophical weight of becoming the resource, though. Bahr al-Ulum is a status where the manuscript says people travel from afar to learn from you. This isn't a windfall you can spend. It's an internal, acquired perfection of knowledge. It's achieved through rigorous discipline and internal effort. To achieve this, the student has to metabolize the wisdom, not just ingest the water. If the ultimate power were purely external, the reward would be purely material. Simple economic relief that requires no internal change. The text goes out of its way to distinguish this from a mere transaction. That promise of healing grace washing away toxins, that emphasizes internal purity. It suggests the spiritual benefit is fundamentally different from the material one, precisely because it requires the individual to perform an active, intentional spiritual overhaul.
But even if we accept that the individual is the agent of purification, the power they tap into is still external. Let's move to the interpretation of authority's role in overcoming hardship, specifically fitna. The stormy sea, the external upheaval, is the environment the authority dictates. Protection is granted to survive those massive societal shifts. The survival is ensured because the higher power represented by the sea grants immunity from the destruction it unleashes. And let's look at the mundane but crucial issue of debt. The manuscript explicitly states that the sea, that is, the authority, will provide a way to pay off the debt. This is a promise of material intervention. It shows the authority acting as the proactive agent.
I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning, because the text links the physical action, the wudu or washing, to the relief from debt or illness as a causal chain. The solution for illness is the saline power, washing away toxins from the soul and body. It implies an internal, restorative process that has to be initiated by the individual's intention. The individual's willingness to undertake the purification is the necessary precondition. If the authority were the sole agent, the relief would just be arbitrary, a sudden windfall. But the text frames it as a response. The action is the mechanism that allows the authority's benevolence to manifest. The individual holds the operational key to the interaction, not just a begging bowl.
If the individual truly holds the key, why is the greatest miracle interpreted primarily as protection from external law? This brings us to walking on water. The manuscript interprets this as a sign that one can undertake a risky venture, a dangerous external undertaking, and succeed where others would certainly drown. The success is granted because the dreamer is protected. The material laws no longer limit you. This demonstrates the supreme power of the authority, represented by the sea, to suspend nature's rules for the faithful individual. The individual's faith is the trigger, yes, but the power to suspend gravity, to prevent the inevitable physical law of drowning, that is the authority's jurisdiction alone.
That is a compelling argument, and I think you're misplacing the weight of the interpretation. Have you considered that it focuses entirely on the internal quality required? The act is defined as the perfection of intention. The emphasis is on the certainty, yaqeen, being anchored in truth. It's not simply that the authority protects you from the laws. It's that your internal perfection has risen to a metaphysical level, where the constraints of the material world are, well, they're conceptually irrelevant to your trajectory. It is a profound statement of agency. When your conviction is perfect, the material limitations cease to be functional limitations for you. This is the ultimate symbol of individual spiritual agency dominating material reality. The ocean serves as the perfect, objective test against which the strength of the soul is measured, and ultimately proves its transcendence.
I have to reject the notion that perfected yaqeen somehow makes the laws irrelevant. If the laws are suspended, it is by an agent greater than the laws themselves. If I am walking on the water, the authority has granted me temporary immunity from drowning, a specific divine intervention. The achievement is therefore a testament to the grantor's power to temporarily rewrite physical reality for the faithful. To suggest that the internal conviction itself rewrites gravity is to attribute divine power to the human heart, which I just don't believe the text supports.
But the text specifically points to the intention making the success possible. If it were merely protection, the interpretation would stress the authority's protection, but it stresses the internal perfection of the dreamer. Yaqeen is the active force. The power is located in the conviction. The physical world, represented by the deep dark sea, is merely the challenge that allows the spiritual mastery to demonstrate its dominion. If we look for the highest form of meaning in the manuscript, it's not in grants of wealth, but in the individual's capacity to overcome the very laws of nature through spiritual excellence.
To summarize my position then, the evidence of the manuscript consistently points to the ocean as supreme authority, the master. Its explicit dual states, calm representing benevolent governance and stormy representing fitna, and its rewards, oceanic wealth, guaranteed protection, they all reinforce its primary function as an external, powerful determinant of fortune and stability. And while internal states are necessary for activation, the power source and the sheer scale of the outcome reside externally with the authority the sea personifies.
And my view maintains that while the ocean defines the external boundaries of reality, the highest spiritual insights, the achievement of Bahar al-Ulum, and especially the strength of yaqeen required to walk on water, demonstrate that the ocean serves less as a master who simply grants favors, and more as the ultimate objective metric against which the individual's internal perfection and intention are measured. The evidence of the individual transcending material laws through perfected conviction proves that internal agency is the ultimately transcendent factor in the text's hierarchy.
It is clear that the manuscript provides a profound and a challenging framework for understanding this essential interplay between the external world of authority and the internal world of faith.
And we are left with the necessary task of weighing whether the source of power or the ultimate effect of spiritual perfection is the truest reflection of the divine order embedded in the text. Thank you for illuminating this distinction.